You're listening to the All Things Data Podcast, the show that brings you insights and informed conversation around today's ever-advancing knowledge economy. In the spirit of Daniel Kahneman, Peter Diamandis, and Google Moonshots, All Things Data brings together leading data scientists, technologists, business model experts, and futurists to discuss how to utilize, harness, and deploy data science, data-driven strategies, and enable digital transformation. Your hosts are Dan Yarmalak, Dr. Manjeet Reghe, and Thomas Marlowe.
Hi, everyone. You're listening to the All Things Data Podcast. My name is Manjeet Reghe. So this is a podcast where we talk about everything related to data science and its applications to different industry verticals. And I'm joined by my co-host, Dan Yarmaluk. Hi, Dan.
Hello, Dr. Reghe. How are you?
Doing well. So who do we have on today?
We have a great guest today, Chaudhry. Asher brings over 18 years of experience as a customer-focused technology executive with a proven track record of shaping and executing enterprise technology strategies that transform technical capabilities, take data and translate into meaningful digital transformations, which enable C-suite business executives to incorporate new insights into their decision-making processes. He is a proven industry thought leader and currently working at Target Corporation as Senior Director of Technology, where he leads high-performing software engineering and big data platforms and product engineering teams. Prior to Target, Asher held leadership roles at UnitedHealth Group, Blue Cross Blue Shield, and Thomson Reuters, where he led teams in both data and software engineering. Asher is an active speaker at local and global tech conferences. He is also a faculty member at the University of St. Thomas at the program in software engineering, where he teaches courses on big data topics. Welcome, Asher.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Reghe and Dan. Great to be here.
Wow, that was a long bio. Asher, Dan was almost out of breath reading through all of that. So what I want to start off is, can you talk a little bit about your career, your journey, where you started, and the path you're on?
So I define myself as a software engineer at heart. And from a formal education and training standpoint, I went to Minnesota State University, Mankato for a bachelor's degree in computer science. And I graduated in the early 2000s, which was an interesting economic time for tech jobs as the dot-com bubble had just burst. And some folks I knew at the time had switched their majors to explore other career options. But I knew at the time this is what I wanted to do. So I figured if it didn't work out, I could always think about switching career at a later point. So I stuck with it. Then luckily, I landed a software engineer role at a smaller company in southern Minnesota, not too far from Mankato. There, I learned a lot about web application development and backend databases using open source tools and languages, which was actually very rare at the time, because most large organizations did not use open source at the time like they do now. So I was lucky in the sense that I got to explore that a little bit early on. So I worked there for 5 years and then wanted to experience a large organization and landed a software engineering role at Thomson Reuters. With Thomson Reuters being a very large global organization, I got exposure to how different teams work together to create and develop software at a large scale. Fast forward a little while there, I went over to UnitedHealth Group, and that was a time when mobile devices were just coming out, like the iPhone had just come out, the iPad just came out, and the very first version of the Android smartphone had come out, and mobile development was this new hot thing, which is now obviously a norm, just like the web. So I got the opportunity at the time to work on UnitedHealth Group's first mobile app at the time, which was a great, fun learning experience. And then I got recruited into Blue Cross Blue Shield of Minnesota, another large healthcare provider. There, I got exposed to the IBM tech stack and also got into my first leadership role with leading a team of software engineers and got to deliver some very large and complex initiatives there. And then a few years later, I got recruited back into UnitedHealth Group into a leadership role via some folks who I had worked with in the past. This was, again, a very interesting time because um, there was this new thing called big data, which was just coming to the surface. And I had not worked in a data role prior, but I started digging into it and got the opportunity to modernize applications using big data technologies and to implement some of these big data technologies there also. And then I also started to lead large teams of data and software engineers there at UHG again, and delivered some very interesting modernization efforts there. Once again, a few years later, got recruited into my current organization, which is Target Corp. That was again a very interesting time because Target and a lot of the broader retail industry at the time was going through a transformation phase, which was technology first, and data was a significant part of it. There at Target, I got the opportunity to work on leading big data tech platforms and internally built data engineering tools that supported various data science and AI use cases. And I had the good fortune of sharing my learnings and experiences via various avenues. One of the avenues here, like teaching at the University of St. Thomas, big data course. So that's kind of the journey that I've been on, and really feel fortunate to be able to continue that path.
Asher, one of the things, it seems like you've worked at some of the largest organizations out there. What are some of the challenges most companies face when it comes to getting some real value out of their data, whether they're large Fortune 100 organizations or mid-sized companies?
Yeah, I think this is a continuous challenge, Dan, for any size organization. They would face, especially as they grow in terms of their data accumulation and utilization for various use cases. And these challenges, I think, the challenge then really becomes how can you make sure that the right, meaningful, and accurate and fresh data is available? And it is available when and where it's needed to solve the organization's problems. It could be for reporting purposes or data science, AI, or machine learning use cases. But having the appropriate processes in place and the right engineering to have those data pipelines built in an automated and timely manner can be the biggest challenge for a lot of these organizations. I think for that, organizations need the right governance and availability in place. And I firmly believe this is not a do once and forget uh, sort of a problem to solve. It's a continuous involvement that needs continuous engagement to make sure that the problem doesn't come back again.
So, in your opinion, Asher, do you think larger organizations are better off, or are maybe startups better positioned to embrace transformation? Sometimes bigger the organization, it's not as quick on its feet, but at the same time, it has access to a lot of resources that a new one might not have, and a newer organization might be quick, but it might not have a lot of resources. What do you think?
Yeah, I think a lot of times large organizations, depending on their business, some of the large organizations may have been around for quite some time, decades even, and they may have some run the business sorts of processes that are really essential to run the business, and that sometimes may slow them down, particularly for healthcare organizations where I've spent a lot of time in. There are also lots of rules and regulations, a lot of laws like HIPAA, and a lot of these policies that can also sort of slow you down at times. So it really depends on the business of the organization as well. Sometimes if you're starting out fresh, if you're a company that's just started in the last, say, 5 or 10 years, then you may have a better, more agile sort of mode of operation, because you may not have some legacy systems in place, or you may not have some on-prem data centers. You may be a cloud-born company like some of the newer ones. But at the same time, some of those organizations, newer organizations, may also feel a lot of rapid growth. And when there is rapid growth, a lot of these newer organizations may not necessarily be equipped to deal with that growth at a rapid pace. So sometimes we would also see newer modern companies falling into that problem also, because now they're scaled at a very rapid manner and their data may proliferated at a scale that they weren't anticipating.
Asher, what about the role of the cloud and big data? We hear cloud native is the way to go and hybrid cloud. What industry trends are you seeing? Where do you think it'll go in the future? The demands of these cloud engineers and architecture. We hear it, we feel it, we know it enabled COVID, but what's really happening in the trenches?
Dan, this is a very interesting topic, I think, because there is no one size fits all approach, in my opinion, with this. It really depends on where your organization is coming from and where it's heading. A lot of times, large companies like whether it's UHG or Target that have been around for decades have very large and robust data centers built, which sometimes can be more cost effective than the cloud options available out there. But then the cloud also provides a lot of flexibility and quick ramp up time, which is also very useful for large organizations. And on the other hand, for newer organizations that have not been around for maybe decades and needed to scale up quick to keep up with their fast business growth, cloud is a really good solution, so that they don't have to worry about the physical infrastructure and can really focus on building applications and tech solutions that solve their business problems. So I think we are seeing a bit of a hybrid model in that sense, even a hybrid cloud model, I would say, where an organization may continue presence and then also leverage multiple clouds for their needs. But it also depends on the nature of the business and the organization. From a data engineer or a data science standpoint, I think one thing that we need to keep in mind is the cloud vendors also have some specific tools and offerings that may not necessarily be portable to other cloud offerings out there. So organizations would also need to make that decision when they're choosing those cloud vendor specific tools for their data science or data engineering needs, and how attached do they really want to be with a specific cloud vendor.
That's a good segue to my next question. When a company has to select a particular cloud vendor, in your opinion, Asher, what do you think they should be looking at? And that is one part I wanted to ask. And the other is, in the industry, do you see a trend where companies have multiple cloud vendors at the same company, or do you mostly see one particular cloud vendor being invested in?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Dr. Reggie. I'll start with the latter part of the question here. A few years ago, from my personal observation, I was seeing a lot of companies just getting into the cloud, right? So they would have one cloud vendor, and maybe they had an on-prem presence, and maybe they did not. Maybe they were all cloud-based. But now we see more and more organizations trying to get on more than one cloud. And the reason we see is a little bit of a competitiveness between the cloud vendors also comes in handy. It works in the benefit of the consumers, that is the organizations. And then it also gives flexibility for the organizations to either transition their workloads between different cloud vendors and also take advantage of some of these unique capabilities that are being offered by different cloud vendors. For instance, if there's an organization that's heavily vested in AWS. And now they're really using all of the proprietary tooling that AWS has to offer, whether it's their machine learning algorithms or data science use cases or big data storage. Then you're hooked on S3. And what if uh, Microsoft Azure came up with another offering that's really uh, going to solve your use case in a very rapid manner, but now all your data is there, and now to
Right.
move to from an S3 to HT Insight is going to be really problematic. It's going to require a lot of time, a lot of effort. By the time you're doing that, you may lose that opportunity. So I feel a lot of that is organizations are starting to think about that portability factor also.
Mhm.
Yeah, that those are some of the reasons that I also see being factored in when organizations are making cloud vendor choices.
But having multiple vendors also poses a challenge, right? Because as you rightly pointed out, you might have data in AWS and then you have to port it, or sometimes you might have certain use cases implemented in with one cloud vendor and some others with the other, so that interoperability may not be there, right?
Yeah, that's a really good point, Dr. Regi. The interoperability may not be there. What I'm seeing out in the industry is some organizations are also using different cloud vendors for specific use cases. Like part of the business may be there for um, on a particular cloud for a different use case. I was talking to somebody recently who was part of a global organization that has a lot of business in Asia and South America. And they are choosing different cloud vendors based on where they're operating.
Hmm.
So in Asia, they may have one cloud vendor, and in South America, they may have a different cloud vendor because of how those offerings are for those particular regions, and their workloads are really segregated for that particular region because of their healthcare operating model that really has some local laws that they need to abide by also. So those are also some of the nuances that I see are factored in with that choice.
Sure. What's one thing you wish you had known when you started out and began your career?
Yeah, now that I'm about 18, 20-ish years into my career, when I look back at it, what I really did not know at the beginning of my career was how vast a tech career can really be. I started out as a software engineer thinking, yes, there are a handful of languages around, nowadays, at that time at least. And really, two or three at the time were really the prominent ones. Or the other path at the time was you could go the infrastructure route. But over the last 20 years, the industry has really evolved so much. Now, when we think about infrastructure, we really think about infrastructure as code, with DevOps being the norm. All builds and deploys are automated by software engineers themselves. We rarely have release management and release engineering teams. I continue to be fascinated by the evolutions in the tech space. We are certainly living in an interesting time where we are innovating faster than ever before and continuously raising the bar. I went into my career with more of a linear sort of thinking, but within the first few years, it took me a few years uh, to learn that in tech, there is no straight line. There are endless possibilities.
And, so with that in mind, what advice would you give someone wanting to pursue this technology career similar to yours?
Yeah, that question has been coming up quite a bit lately, especially the last couple of years for me. For a lot of people who come to me for advice on pursuing a tech career, I hear that they're not sure if their background aligns well to pursue a tech career. I would say to them that does not matter much at all. We are in the best of times when it comes to learning. There are so many resources and opportunities out there, whether it's YouTube, Coursera, or just online discussion forums on Quora or many other programs like in universities such as like the University of St. Thomas that people can look into for a career switch. A lot of companies out there aren't even requiring a 4-year degree to hire you as a software engineer necessarily anymore. A lot of that also has to do with the talent shortage in the tech space. I have come across many high-performing software engineers who did not have the maybe the opportunity to go for a 4-year degree, or in some cases, their formal training or education was not in the software industry area. So I would say don't let that hold you back, really. In fact, at Target, we have a program that's called the Emerging Engineer Program, where Target recruits folks who went through coding boot camps and learn to code that way. They get the opportunity to go through that boot camp via some external partners, and then Target also provides them with some learning opportunities, like hands-on development opportunities, and then they get hired as a software engineer into Target. So I would really say to people who are interested in that career, just get into it, give it your best, and good things will follow.
One of the most important things to have a successful long career is also to keep yourself abreast with the changes, keeping yourself updated. You mentioned a few resources, but um, over these years, what were those best resources that have helped you along the way?
Yeah. So I'd say I really believe the best resources for me have really been the people around me. Where I've worked, whatever role I was in, I truly believe that I could learn from anyone that I came across. For some folks, it could be tech skills, and from some other folks, it could be learning about people leadership. I was very fortunate in my career that people around me have been very supportive and continue to be like that. And I try my best to pass that on and provide that support to whoever I can, whoever I come across with, and also try to be a good resource for them. If I can help them directly, maybe, then I can definitely try to connect them with someone else who can. So I would say, sometimes we may undervalue the value of people resources because we have so many technical solutions and online solutions available. But I really found that for me and for a lot of other people, the people resources may also be the really, really valuable resources around us.
Mhm. Now, for the past, I think, couple of years, Asher, you have been teaching at the graduate programs in software, University of St. Thomas. You've been teaching
Yeah.
big data management course. Um, Being a teacher, being an educator, right? It's a um, different experience altogether. How has that changed you?
First and foremost, Dr. Regge, I would say it's been a truly humbling experience for me. Um, Initially, before I got into teaching, I would think like, yes, this is the job people do. They're professionals, and they're expected to come in with a certain mindset and certain problem solving. Over the last 18 or 20 years, I had sort of not seen that formal learning process in action, and it's really fortunate and humbling for me to be part of that learning process for others, where I feel that I'm fortunate enough to be in a position where I can be a resource for others, where I can help guide people. Yes, this is what we're studying in the classroom, but how do we tie that out to the real world? Because a lot of times in my undergrad, I was not necessarily thinking beyond the classroom. I was like, yes, this is what I'm taught, this is what I know, and little did I know that the practical implementations a lot of times can be very different than what we read in a textbook. And somebody who's giving real time examples can really benefit me. And I'm also really touched by some students who keep in touch with me after they graduate, or sometimes, a couple of times at Target, I've crossed paths just in the hallways with students of mine. So that's also a really great feeling, that yes, that's a person that I made some sort of contribution to. So it's very rewarding in that sense for me.
Yeah, and my experience personally is that when you are able to explain to somebody, your own understanding gets enhanced. Because when you first are trying to learn a new technology, you try to grasp it as much as possible. But when you have to explain that to somebody,
Yeah.
you have to really kind of internalize it, and that is when your understanding really improves. I'm pretty sure you must have felt something like that as well.
Absolutely, Dr. Rage, 100%. Because as you know, we try to refine these courses in the graduate program of software. We try to update it, keep it updated every 6 months. And a lot of times, what that means is incorporating new topics in the course, topics that I may not have necessarily been exposed to directly in my experience. So that also gives me the opportunity to be a continuous learner. Now that I'm a people leader, but not just be learning from a leadership standpoint, but also being more hands-on in my learning. So yes, I've definitely enjoyed that aspect. And as I'm teaching it to others and discussing the topics in detail, it really clarifies and deepens my understanding also at the same time.
Asher, what is one common myth about your profession or field that you want to debunk?
Yeah, one common myth that I feel, and I've been hearing more and more of that recently, is that in order to get into tech, you really need to start early on. If like you weren't already coding when you were 14 years old, maybe it's too late for me now. While we do see coding being added to school curriculums at a very young age now, even as young as 5 years old, a lot of times nowadays. But I think that's a nice to have, but not a must have. I have also worked with several folks over the years who made their career transition in their 40s, and they have been doing really, really well. So my advice is it's never too late. If you think this is something you like, don't worry about your background or never think it's too late. Just start somewhere and keep at it.
Yeah, Asher, I'm living testimony of that going into technology or hardcore technology, data science, my
That's
40s.
yeah,
And
that's awesome.
there's a place for a lot of people, right? They could have technical aptitude and working on very technical things at an architectural level, from a marketing level, marketing automation level, finding which friction points to grease. Sometimes that business MBA with some technology skills can help augment the organization as well. And I can understand your viewpoint as well, because with the demand of these people and skill sets, there's not enough of them. So I imagine
Yeah.
if you're healthy and you got the right mindset and you want to be innovative, there's an ample room for everybody to play.
Absolutely, Dan. And I think some of these other perspectives that folks like yourself, like you described your background, bring in is very valuable to some of the other folks like me who just grew up doing technology, right? I've never really worked a non-technical job. So that perspective to me is really valuable and interesting also.
We have now been working through the pandemic for well over a year. How has that been going for you, Asher, and your teams, in terms of working remotely? Can you share any learnings, experiences?
That's a great question. A question that we all have been thinking about, and it's worked very differently for all of us. For me, when we quickly switched to remote work, it was challenging at first from a personal life standpoint, because at a personal level, it wasn't just my work that was remote. My whole household, which includes my working spouse, a school going child, all of us switched remote. So it involved setting up the appropriate workspaces with the needed equipment for us all. It took a few days, and then things started settling down for me personally. From a work standpoint, we we at Target were quickly able to roll out tools like Zoom and quickly switched to online meetings, and also recognize that everyone is going through a different situation at home. With the pandemic, everyone was impacted and is impacted differently. With folks like myself, some folks like myself had school-going kids. Maybe for others, coming into work was a social event also, which was no longer an option. So recognizing that all my team members were dealing with the pandemic situation differently, and also giving them the support and space they needed was very important. As we head into the pandemic, we also saw different shopping behaviors from our guests at Target. A lot of that traffic moved online, where our systems were now operating at peak levels during regular days, similar to the volumes of digital traffic that we would see during holidays like Thanksgiving and Black Friday. So operational excellence from a software and system standpoint also became very important. But fortunately for us, we had plans in place for those kinds of spikes like we do every year for the holidays. So we had to go back into our peak season mode, as that was becoming somewhat of a usual spike of traffic for us. Now we're still remote at this time. We will know more about our future work direction later in the summers for most of us, as vaccines continue to be rolled out. We'll see what the new norm becomes. But at this time, I would say personally, I feel things are looking better than they were a few years ago with the vaccine rollout, at least here in the US. Unfortunately, we can't say that globally just yet, but hopefully things will turn to the better there also.
Yeah. Is there anything interesting you're reading right now, Asher?
Yeah. So I am about halfway through this new book that I picked up. It's called Think Like a Rocket Scientist by Ozan Varol, who's the author. And by trade, Ozan Varol is a real-life rocket scientist turned into a lawyer, so very interesting background. And the book really talks about how rocket scientists think in terms of the levels of unpredictability they have in their work. And I find that very fascinating and very relevant to tech, because a lot of times, we write software and we do a lot of testing and we do deployments, and something unforeseen may happen, then we have to react to it. So similar thing for rocket scientists. He talks about how rocket scientists come in a room and they bring a bag of peanuts. They would eat peanuts while they're watching the launch of the rocket. There's no technical rhyme or reason behind it. As he explained, it's more of a good luck charm. So during the initial rocket launches, the scientists had a bag of peanuts and they were anxiously eating peanuts as they were watching the rocket launch, and the rocket launched successfully. So it has become a good luck charm for rocket scientists over the years, is what he talked about in the book. So a lot of interesting insights and a lot of similarities that I find are relevant to tech here. So more than halfway there through the book, so a few more days and I should be done with it. But I would highly recommend it.
Interesting. Great. Well, that was a great conversation, Asher. And I'm pretty sure our listeners would enjoy it as well. We really thank you for your time. Take care.
Thank you.
My
Asher.
pleasure, Dr. Reggie. Thank you for your time, Dr. Reggie and Dan. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of All Things Data. If you enjoyed this show and want more, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and others, or via RSS so you'll never miss a show. While you're at it, if you found value in this show, we'd appreciate a rating or a review. Until next time.